Exchange in the stem. In young stems, the gases exchange occurs through the epidermis, because in the young stem, the epidermis still lacks the cuticle, and so it is permeable to oxygen and carbon dioxide. But as the epidermis of the stem becomes older, it gets covered with the waterproof cuticle, which then will minimize gases exchange. So in young part of the stem, gases exchange will occur through the epidermis. But in the older part of the stem, where the bark forms, then gases exchange occurs through specialized structures known as the lenticels. Lenticels are openings found on the stems and roots of some woody plants. So if you look at this stem here, these are the lenticels found on the stem of this particular plant. Now, they're formed by loosely packed cork cells. So if you look at the internal structure of the lenticel, here is epidermis. Then beneath the epidermis, there is a mass of loosely packed cork cells. This loose packing creates large air spaces that will permit gases exchange to take place. So carbon dioxide and oxygen leave and enter respectively. So in the stem, oxygen diffuses in and is used in respiration, while carbon dioxide diffuses out through the lenticel. So in this way, the plant is able to obtain oxygen for respiration and release carbon dioxide as a waste product. Now, gases exchange in the roots. In the roots of terrestrial plants, the plants that grow in soils that have air, then gases exchange occurs across the epidermis of the roots. Within the soil, there are air spaces, and so the roots, through the epidermis and the root hair, obtain oxygen from the soil. So oxygen will diffuse into the roots from the soil, and carbon dioxide diffuses out. So this is why it is important for the soils to have air. If the soils get waterlogged, then the roots lack oxygen. Without oxygen, there will be no respiration, and important processes such as active absorption of certain minerals will stop, and the root cells will generally die. So with the root organ dying, then the rest of the plant cannot survive. So soils must be well aerated for many plants to survive, because it is from the soil air that roots obtain oxygen for respiration. However, in aquatic plants, because of the unique environment, the gases exchange is slightly different. The main types of aquatic plants, there's a submerged plant. These are plants that are rooted at the bottom of the water body, and they never grow out to the surface. Such plants obtain carbon dioxide and oxygen from the water by diffusion through the epidermis. For photosynthesis, they obtain carbon dioxide from the water. For respiration, they also obtain oxygen from the water. Now, such submerged plants, like the keratophyllum plant in this photograph, lack cuticle on their leaves. This is to facilitate diffusion, and also their leaves tend to be small. The leaves are generally thin with large air spaces within. So these tiny needle-like leaves greatly increase the surface area for gaseous exchange. So you find that the leaves of these submerged plants are thin, very thin, in order to increase the surface area to volume ratio for a faster rate of diffusion. So they obtain carbon dioxide in the presence of light for photosynthesis, and at night they'll obtain oxygen from the water and release carbon dioxide. So remember, the shoot, unlike the terrestrial plants, the shoots are not covered in cuticle. So the epidermis is exposed, and it is through the epidermis that gaseous exchange takes place. Then there's the emergent type. The emergent types of plants, these are plants whose roots are firmly anchored at the bottom of the water body. Then the rest of the plant emerges from the water. An example is a water lily. In the water lily, the stem is actually underground and it has very long leaf stalk that exposes the leaves, and even the flower stalk, very long, that exposes them to the atmosphere, so that with these very broad leaves, they can obtain gases. They release during the day through the stomata that are on the upper surface. Oxygen is released and carbon dioxide is absorbed. Then at night, in the absence of light, they obtain oxygen from the surrounding and release carbon dioxide. So these broad leaves increase the surface area for gaseous exchange, and the stomata are mainly found on the upper surface where they are exposed to the atmosphere. Then another type of emergent type of plants are the mangrove plants that grow in swampy environment. These mangrove plants grow in the estuaries, areas where the soil is always waterlogged and therefore lacks air. So these mangrove plants have developed specialized breathing roots known as pneumatophores. Pneumatophores grow out of the soil and into the atmosphere. These pneumatophores have lenticels on their surfaces. This is to facilitate rapid gaseous exchange. So they obtain oxygen from the atmosphere and release carbon dioxide. Then within the roots and the rest of the plant, there are parenchyma tissues for rapid diffusion of gases. Now, parenchyma tissues are spongy tissues with large air spaces which allow rapid gaseous exchange. They are found in leaves of certain plants. They are also found in stems and the roots. In this picture, for example, this is a leaf petiole of a water hyacinth. You can see the tissue here is spongy because of the large air spaces. Same case here, you have the stem of a papyrus. You can see the large air spaces. So it is the presence of these large air spaces among the tissues that make it parenchymatous. So parenchyma is simply a tissue that is spongy because of the presence of large air spaces. And these large air spaces facilitate rapid diffusion. So where they are present, the parenchyma tissues enable gaseous exchange between the leaves and the roots. For example, for the emergent type of plants, like the water lily, the petiole of the leaf is parenchymatous, and through the parenchyma tissues, gases can diffuse rapidly from the leaves into the submerged parts of the plant. Same case with the mangrove. The pneumatophores have parenchyma tissues to facilitate rapid diffusion of gases deep into the roots and out. So oxygen will rapidly diffuse through the parenchyma tissues Two, the submerged roots that are found beneath the waterlogged soils.